you inside in just a minute, but before I do, I want to share with you a little bit about what it was like to try to wrap my mind around 25 years of time. Basically, what I found, I had to keep stepping back a little farther, and a little farther, and a little farther, until I found myself lying in the hospital, Christmas Eve, 1968. I had broken my leg in a skiing accident in St. Joe's Hospital, downtown St. Paul. And before I get to go home a few days later, I see WCCO4 TV with Dave Moore doing 1968, the year in retrospect. I was 15 years old. Looking out at the crowd, I know that I'm not the only one here old enough to remember some of what happened that made the news in 1968. What does anybody remember? Riots. Chicago, Democratic National Convention, Vietnam War. Martin Luther King is assassinated. Bobby Kennedy is assassinated. The country seems to be coming out not just at the seams, but everywhere in the fabric things seem to be falling apart. The year starts with Eartha Kitt at the White House telling Lady Bird Johnson the war in Vietnam is immoral. This movie comes out. So does 60 Minutes and Laugh-In and Mr. Rogers. And Boeing comes out with the 747. Eugene McCarthy, the Dove from Minnesota, and Hubert Humphrey, the Hawk from Minnesota, are the big contenders at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Why? Because LBJ was so torn apart by the war in Vietnam, he decided he didn't want to be president anymore. Richard Nixon got elected, but before Nixon got elected, images were burned forever into the mind of citizens in this country and around the world. One of little girls running down the road, one on the ground, the My Lai massacre. Another one, a South Vietnamese general holding a pistol to the head of a South Vietnamese peasant. I'm 15 years old. I'm just starting to sort out having a life that's based in the community as opposed to a life based in my family. And everywhere I look, it seems like there's a protest or a demonstration or a riot. There are riots in Paris and in Madison, Wisconsin, and Howard University in Washington, D.C. In Prague, the Czech people revolt. The Prague Spring of 1968, only to be followed by the fall of '68, where the heel of the Iron Curtain comes down hard. So hard that the Albanians can't take it anymore, and they bolt from the Iron Curtain. Swaziland declares independence. Pope Paul VI gives the birth control encyclical to the world, telling Catholics that birth control is not acceptable. The American Indian movement is born in Minneapolis. And the Civil Rights Movement moves from the south to the north under the impetus of the Black Power movement. 10 days before the first Olympics is held in the Third World in Mexico City, 5,000 people are slaughtered in a square in Mexico, and the government of Mexico manages to suppress the news for fear that the Olympics would be canceled by the international community. But at those Olympics, 2 American athletes take the stand to the Star-Spangled Banner and give the Black Power salute. What's that spell? Fuck! What's that spell? Fuck! What's that spell? Fuck! What's that spell? Oh my God! I'm trying to make sense out of this. Conservative, Catholic, Republican parents that make no sense to me at all. The world is coming apart, and I'm 15 years old, and I've got to figure out, what do I do to try to make this world a better place? Yes, God, let's read it. And it's 5, 6, 7, decades. There ain't no time to wonder why. We'll be gonna die. It seems like if we don't do something to stop this insanity that is America, we are all gonna die. Here I am in suburban white Roseville, trying to figure this out. Well, come on in. It'll be a few years before we get to 1985. You're welcome to sit on a chair. There are some chairs in here, and you can bring a chair in with you. There are more chairs in here, but this is not like your standard theater where the chairs are bolted to the ground. If you need to move, or you want to move, or you want to sit on the floor, you don't want to sit on a chair at all, you want to lay down or stand, I encourage you to think of this as like we're touring an art museum, or we're taking a tour of a city, or we're someplace where you're as mobile as I am if you want to be. So come on in, and in a couple minutes we'll be in the 80s and we'll get started. Oh, two other things, important things. One is, in the window wells, there are little red ribbons. If you recognize the names on any of the t-shirts hanging in the space, I encourage you to attach a red ribbon to the t-shirt, much as someone visiting a Jewish cemetery sets a stone on the headstone of somebody who's passed. And the other thing is, I'm going to take a route through this evening that's, who knows exactly what the route is going to be, but if it seems to you like I've skipped something that you want to ask a question about, I'm your tour guide. Feel free to stop me. We will stop the inexorable march of time. It will add a minute or two for the length of the show, but I will answer your question and then we'll continue on. So this is an interactive experience, so again, welcome. Come on in. Okay, so 1984 just ended. Tina Turner is touring the world with her Private Dancer release album. And I'm about to move back to Minneapolis from New York City, where I was dancing with Remy Charlotte. A great piece called, Remy. And a piece called 10 Men at the Next Wave Festival, or as Remy loved to call it, the Permanent Wave Festival at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. And as the full-time work with Remy ended, I decided to come back to Minneapolis because I had a sense that there was this tsunami building in the Atlantic, coming with full force at places like New York City. And the tsunami was the AIDS epidemic. You could feel already in the early 1985 that it was going to hit hard in New York. And I knew that it was going to hit in Minneapolis. There was no way Minneapolis was going to stay dry from a wave of that magnitude. But I thought maybe it would be less violent, less horrible here than it was going to be in New York. So here I am in Minneapolis. It's the summer of '85. Poonie Dodson comes to town to visit. He's a colleague and sometimes lover, a fabulous dancer. We do a piece together in the elementary school at St. Stephen's. Two naked, gay performance artist dancers in a Catholic elementary school. Buried under debris, broken sticks, and newspapers and trash everywhere. As the lights come up, the piece is called Warsaw II. It was inspired by the fact that at the end of World War II, the Nazis gave the order that no brick should be left on top of another brick as the Nazi army retreated through Warsaw. So Poonie and I managed to pluck ourselves individually out from underneath all of the carnage. And we spot another person in the room and we make our way toward each other and we find some water and we dump it over each other's naked bodies and we wash each other. And we find some rags to clothe each other, and we take some of the branches and we make a sort of lean-to, and we gather some twigs and make a small fire, and as the fire is lit, the lights go out.